And I wanted to ask you actually on that, and I may as well do it now. I was going to save it for a little bit later on, but we are living proof of what you're talking about there in terms of just how difficult it is to get a deal for somebody of the caliber and the stature of Mohamed Salah over the line. You make reference to three proposals between 2021 and 2022 being rejected by them. None of them were deemed acceptable. You make reference to the fact that Trent getting the captaincy over Salah upset him as well, and lots of different things. The Premier League was sort of muted as a potential destination, another club in the Premier League for Salah at the time. Interviews with the Spanish media sort of stirring the pot as well a little bit. But I want to ask you, like, the upheaval in terms of Liverpool's backroom, obviously with sort of sporting directors coming and going and then coming back in different capacities and all that sort of stuff, and Jörg Schmadtke, whatever we make or don't make of his tenure at the football club, like all of that stuff has kind of led us to where we are now. I won't ask you like how Liverpool got here, but what I will ask you is, from a Salah point of view, what will he and I guess Rami Abbas made of all of that? Because he clearly liked the settled nature of Liverpool Football Club and the fact it was all running seamlessly behind the scenes. That hasn't been the case for some time now. You could even factor in Klopp's departure whenever we think about Klopp, which we'll touch on in a minute. But I guess all of that combined and all those factors are kind of where we are, where we're at now a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, to what extent Salah is aware of all the upheaval at Liverpool behind the scenes and the actual impact that that's having. I wasn't quite able to nail that in the book, if I'm being totally honest, but I think what people have got to remember is certainly footballers now, their field of interest tends not to extend far beyond what directly affects them in a very obvious way. Now that's not to say that they're sort of self-absorbed or sort of lean on that sort of very easy idea, but football clubs are such big beasts, aren't they? Now, that the a big a chunk of the book is about like sort of how certainly how Salah feels the last 4 years Liverpool should have done better. They should have won more trophies. I think, if I'm being honest, I think a lot of fans overlook that. Obviously, people have had a great ride along the way. Lots of great European trips. Nearly winning the quadruple. Last season they weren't that far away before it fizzled away to nothing. But for somebody like Salah, it's not good enough, really. It's not good enough. His last 4 years, I think he's won. He obviously got injured in the FA Cup final, so he didn't really play a massive role in that. He missed the last League Cup final and he played in the League Cup final before that in 2022. So in his head, he's only played like a meaningful role in one major cup, which for a player who's at his peak years in this moment, it's a bit of a disappointment, really. So I think if you look at his social media posts again, it gets at that. I remember when Liverpool missed out on the Champions League, he came out on social media. This is what really fascinates me about Salah, because he is willing to say what he thinks when the moment is right. And he came out and said, this is not good enough for Liverpool. Nobody else really came out that strongly and said it. It was sort of, oh, well, there's all the mitigation. He was just like, it's not good enough. And he's not happy about that. He wants to win. So this is all in his, this is all part of his thinking as well. I think he does want to. I think he does want to stay, but I think where the doubts creep in is: do Liverpool want him to stay, and are Liverpool actually going to contend for the titles that he thinks the club is capable of, with the right decision making and right investments and whatever else? So, I sort of agree with him. I think that, obviously, after winning the league title, it lifted so much pressure for a lot of people around the club, and that sort of feeling lasted quite a long time. Really, it didn't really matter if we missed out on the Champions League. We've had a good run. It's bound to happen. But for somebody like Salah, that's a season in his career. Where he's coming towards the back. I'm not saying the back end, but if it was past the age of 30. It annoys him, it frustrates him, and he thinks that things should be better. So things I would say over the last couple of years, Liverpool have had moments, seasons of opportunity where they've nearly gone close, but ultimately things haven't been quite right off the pitch. Lots of upheaval, too much change, and they are where they are now. I think it feels like they're sort of heading in the right direction, but again, they need to sort of get these contract renewals right and still invest in the team if they're really gonna have a go, I think. So yeah, interesting times ahead. he certainly feels, from the conversations that I had, just really frustrated that they've not been quite where he feels that the club could be, or could have, the trophies that they could have won.
Yeah, and that speaks to sort of just how driven he is. That speaks to his mentality, doesn't it? And you said it a moment ago, whenever he does speak, it tends to have these sort of punctured messages in the round. The one last night that we've already referenced, and the Old Trafford comments post-game a few weeks ago. But more often than not, they have tended to be sort of, this isn't enough, sort of that matching his ambitions, or not having the sort of the drive and the willingness to do so. Because you said there, for us as Liverpool fans, that Premier League and even the Champions League prior was like, that was everything to us. But for him, it is just another one along the way, if you like, and he wants more and more and more. And that is why he's as brilliant he is as well, quite frankly. So yeah, all ties in together. Just finally, Simon, we have to discuss Jurgen Klopp. You described it in a tweet over the weekend as the relationship has been professional most of the time, but nothing more. Now, I think we all have this sort of idea, I definitely do, that it was all sort of harmony and it was all sort of beautiful behind the scenes, and everyone just got on because so many players have come out and described Jurgen Klopp as a father figure and just worshipped the ground that he walked on. He was the messiah to so many, the hugs after the game, etc., etc., etc. However, I think it's fair to say, having read the book and having sort of unpicked some of the lines from it, in particular about Jurgen, that maybe necessarily wasn't always the case between Salah and him. And I guess we saw that right at the end at West Ham a little bit, but there's a lot more to it than that as well.
I think the important thing to stress is, when you try as a journalist, try and explain a conflict that exists inside the club, it doesn't mean that they're at each other's throats, all the time. It doesn't mean that. But then, when people, what you're fighting against is quite largely is this sort of, this perception of harmony where, when a club's successful, well, everything off the pitch must be great because everybody likes each other. People forget, that in sport, particularly team sport, a lot of success is based off the back of confrontation. That if even now, I think that maybe there's a perception that inside football players are slightly less, less confrontational and sort of, they have less strong opinions about the game, the way the game's played. It's not the way it was when Roy Keane played, put it that way. The reality is there's a lot of needle and a lot of players wanting to be the main player at that club, and it happens a lot at most clubs. So there is that context. Now, in his relationship with Klopp, as I said, it was fine. It wasn't like it was a problem between the two of them, but there wasn't that sense of warmth in the way that Klopp had the relationship with a variety of other players. So, I've tried to sort of explore this side of Klopp in my reporting over quite a few years, and regularly get reminded, that sort of, you hate Klopp and this, that, and the other. It's just not true. It's just I find the other side of Klopp more interesting than maybe other people might, and I think over the last sort of 10 years, particularly as Liverpool have done well, you've also got club media, everything makes it look great. Everybody on the training pitch, high fives and all this. It's like, what it doesn't show is inside the dressing room when they've lost the game and everyone's having an argument about what's going on. That it never shows any of that, does it? So that's what I've always tried to sort of report on, go beyond maybe the obvious. But so over the years, Salah, the best way of putting it, I think, the best instincts of Klopp, where he sort of feels like he can be your sort of paternal character. The best instincts of Klopp never really worked with Salah because he never needed it. And I think if it goes back, it all goes back really to Egypt and, him being ferociously independent, having to get on a bus and travel 3 hours one way, 3 hours back the other way as a young teenager. I'm not saying he's the only player to have done this sort of thing, but very independent person, doesn't really need that like sort of father figure in his life, can make his own mind up about the way, what he wants and what he needs. Rami Abbas is the person who he really, who he's closest to in his life really at the moment. So I think there's that context around it. So as the years pass, there were certain things that Salah was unhappy with. As I've mentioned, the team not doing as well. I think on the outside again, everyone, oh, it's great. Liverpool are getting close enough. We've won the league title. We've won the Champions League. But for somebody like Salah, being nearly there is just not enough. It's just not enough. So after the Champions League final in 2022, there's a big parade back at Merseyside after they've lost the final. Okay, they've won the two cups before. Salah didn't want to go. He didn't want to even be involved in it. It's like we've lost another final. Could have won three finals in a very different world. And then, the last season, obviously we know it sort of fizzled away and it exploded in the game against West Ham when Klopp scolded Salah publicly. And Salah, I can understand why people sort of condemn Salah for his reaction, but when you actually maybe look at the reasons behind why he reacted that way, it might be a little bit more understandable. So yeah, it's just there's layers to everybody's relationships, and Klopp's relationship by and large with his players, that was his strength. It was players first, environments at Liverpool. Like there's definitely no doubt about that. I mean, the sort of staff issue is another one. There's lots of staff come and go. Like staff sort of see Klopp just as a boss. Really, they don't have that layer. That I think everybody thinks Klopp's going around hugging everybody all the time, loves everybody he works with. It's just not quite. He doesn't have the time in the day to do that for a start. And communicate with people in that way. So it's football clubs aren't quite what they are when things are going well. Particularly when things aren't going well, that there can be issues, which manifests into what we actually saw at West Ham last season.
Yeah, we're at a shadow with Alex. I really properly enjoyed this reading. Again, I've got loads of lines in front of me here that I've unpicked and wanted to discuss. But yeah, honestly, the warts and all element, and the fact you have just dug that little bit deeper under the surface just to really sort of find out what it was. And as you said right at the top there, there was no sort of bad blood between them. Far from it. There was complete sort of professional relationship, but it wasn't quite what he had or seemed to have from the outside of everybody else. And yeah, and the Klopp factor and all of that is really interesting. We did see some of that frostiness start to eke out towards the end, as I mentioned. But yeah, really, really good stuff. Simon, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, mate. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for discussing some of the book with us. You've got a book signing coming up Thursday, the 20th of November. I think I'm right in saying Waterstones, Liverpool 1. That's right. Yeah, tickets are available from the Waterstones website, I believe. So, yeah, Brian Reed, the Daily Mirror columnist, is hosting. So it'll be a good chance to sort of get into some of the themes that we've just spoken about, and maybe the audience, if they want to ask a few questions of their own. Yeah, honestly, we haven't even started to scratch the surface. We could have done another 45 minutes or so on that quite comfortably. But much like Klopp and not having time in the day to hug everybody else, I haven't got time in the day to do any more. Where can we find the book as well, mate? Obviously, I guess all the usual places. Yeah, all the usual places. I mean, in Liverpool, obviously Waterstones are stocking it. I live in Crosby, so I've got to mention Pritchard's. But yeah, nice. Everywhere really. Try and go to a bookshop and buy it. That's what I'd say. Yeah, I would doubly recommend that as well. I did a book signing at Pritchard's with somebody else recently as well. It was very enjoyable. Simon, top man, thank you so much for your time. Everybody else, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Take care. I'll see you soon.